my first Pecha Kucha, so bear with me. Okay, yeah, Ludwig design, architecture and manufacturing. That's what we do. We're an architecture firm and we have a shop and we manufacture things. We're right across the street. So we've been there, I think we've been in that space for 20 years. It's pretty unassuming from the front. When you walk in, you see the architecture practice. So we have old scaffolding desks, and it's this beautiful bow truss building. We have about 5 to 10 architects typically upstairs. Yeah, where we tackle all sorts of different projects, and then we walk down into the shop. And this is my domain. Been there, like Ariel said, the director of fabrication, so you get a sense of like what we have going on. So we have a huge facility. This is that same building, just as you like move through the space. So we have all of our fabrication tools. So we do a lot of like woodworking, metalworking. We also do like cast bronze. We deal with like glass. So the manufacturing element is very like client driven. So our whole practice is we try to like engage a client and we like problem solve through architecture and by making these signature pieces. Yeah, this is like I think we have different, I think this is an old slide. Yeah, so this is a tea group that showed up, and it became an entryway for a Maraude restaurant. So this is like a 6,000 pound teak ball that we bought sight unseen, showed up in a shipping container and customs, and we had to like, sell this idea to the client. From the beginning, he had no idea what he was getting, and it turned out fine. But it's just like speaks to the collaboration of like a small scale manufacturing facility and design. Like this is how it turned out. This is the space. But yeah, it's a challenge making things. We relied heavily on like the whole realm of like from somebody in Indonesia spotting a tea group and thinking of us, to getting the steel, to having a crane operator that we work with to get into the space, moving fast. Okay, we're talking about food groups. So sometimes we think about like how we design, like I talked about that, but the material that we use, we think of food groups. So this first one is glass. Kind of a beautiful material, but how do we use it like in a different way? So this is like a stacked glass facade. And then this is like a little detail of bus shelter, scrap piece of glass. Our firm did all the red bus shelter stations throughout the city. Then we had one of the perks is we got a lot of the old glass, so we try to like reuse that. Another food group is steel, stainless steel, copper, all these metals that we work with. So this is like a sculptural staircase we do. When we tackle and like use the material, we're trying to like express it in a like a unique, honest way. That's kind of the ethos of the firm. Is like, how does this material want to be expressed? And when we design and build in the shop, we're constantly trying to have a conversation with the material. If we're like, it feels like we're fighting it, like we just kind of like take a step back and kind of we let the kind of the process guide the design, which I think is pretty unique to next door. Here's stone. So another food group is this massive stone. This is like, showing how the stone is split. So they used to drill granite and explode it this way. So it just harkens back to like the unpolished nature of what this material can be. Leading to, this is a project where we did a rammed earth wall. So the scale's kind of hard to get. This is like 100 feet long by 60 feet tall. And we worked with Andy Goldsworthy, so he came into our studio and sketched on the floor, and then we scaled that up. Made a giant CNC mold of that, and then had to like send people down in, and they packed that like 6 inches at a time. Again, like without the conversation of a client and having a shop and an artist, like all working together, like you don't get stuff like this made because you have to get buy-in early on, and just having that like be a seismic wall. I mean, there's so much engineering that goes into that. Another food group is what we call like the found objects. So this is we also probably a few architecture firms that have a forklift. This is a buoy that we like to salvage. Cut it in half and it became a light fixture for a bar in Embarcadero. It was hard water, it closed during the pandemic. But yeah, I'm trying to use these like weird objects in a polished way. I was telling somebody earlier, but now when we get asked to make these movie lights, I have to look on like a Google map or the Google satellite images, and I look for them like around ports. This is another found object. It's a little bit different, but this is up at Ole's cabin. I don't know if Ole just recently passed away, so we're in the process of like kind of like dealing with that. And he has a book out as well. But this is up at his cabin. This is an old stock tank, very poetic. And also there's a lot of work that goes into that poetry of making. So you can see like that sauna looks like it's floating from one angle, but the amount of like structure and just even building that out there was a real testament for the shot here. Where they like float the beams across the pool because getting to it from the other side is a challenge. And I wanted to talk about like just how a lot of these like, you know, laser cutters and like all these like high tolerance machines, like we utilize them, but it still comes down to like an actual craftsperson, like assembly, making like little router jigs, chiseling by hand. It still comes down to that, like fit and finish. And when it works the best, we get like a really beautiful result where, you know, the architecture and the manufacturing items like, you know, work together and create a nice space. That's what we try to do.
So, what does manufacturing mean to me? I really want to question my current definition of it, and by the end of this talk, come up with a different definition. I'm really just not happy with it. So if you think about it, the word manufacture is broken into two pieces. Manufacture, manu for hand, factor means make. And so there's a lot of the connotation that there's a human aspect to it. There's human intervention, there's human influence that's happening, turning the materials from the planet into something around us. It's a beautiful thing if you think about it, that we envision something and then we turn it into the world around us, except that we are the only species to have invented this, trash. And trash in the fashion industry is notorious. We make 100 billion garments a year, 30% of those go to landfill. There is a solution. We could all wear hides. The planet would reabsorb these literally and figuratively, but based on the trends and the things I'm seeing in this room, this is not really a trend right now. We're probably not going back to hides anytime soon. So that got me thinking about what other ways we could start to incorporate this into the manufacturing that we do today. And so here is the first experiment. It's taking inspiration from how nature manufactures, right? There's growth and decay. This is a chia vest. Grew it in my garden back when I lived in Palo Alto, this is not very Palo Alto, so I probably got in trouble with someone. That was an interesting concept, not quite the right material. So how can we take inspiration from that, but change the material? This is potassium aluminum sulfate. It's crystallized on a scaffold, and then it gets reabsorbed back into water, and then you can create a cyclical process that way. Love the process. Material's a little heavy. Here, similar situation where we think about how nature manufactures. Nature uses building blocks, lots of little pieces, build them up, and then take them apart. They never lose their value. How can we start to incorporate that into our processes of manufacturing? Build these silicone urchin-like pieces. Again, probably no one's going to wear those, but kind of an interesting thing to think about. This is taking similar approach, but thinking about additive manufacturing. How can we build up structures? And so this is kind of like a human 3D printer building a bodice. And so I was able to find that we could customize based on this kind of additive approach. So that was kind of an interesting prototype to go through to see what was happening there. That material was hot glue. This is also hot glue. Also could customize it. I did actually wear those shoes for an entire day. Yes, my feet got really sweaty, but they did hold up, so that was promising. It's like, okay, cool, the materials are getting closer to what we want. So it leads to this. Taking inspiration from the process, growth and decay and thinking about cyclical process, but how can we use materials that people wear now? So we use yarn, and this is the precursor to the 3D weaving machine that we have over in Emeryville. This is the next iteration of that prototype, taking the same kind of architecture, but putting the stepper motors, putting a solenoid actuator on it so that it runs by itself. And this was enough to kind of jumpstart the project and bring people in at a very early stage. We're now, this is through my company Unspun, we're now at industrial level. So what's happening here is that we've got 2,600 cones. So those are the yarn pieces that are on the sides. Those feed into the machine. And then there are 6 orthogonal yarns. So you can see them here that spin around and around. And we're able to 3D weave in that manner. So we're going straight from yarn to the final product. It's much more additive than you would expect for like cutting and sewing. And the pants that I'm wearing right now are 3D woven. You should come check them out. They have no seams in the legs. They're the same style as these pants right here. And since they were additively built, so woven from the ground up seamlessly, they can also be reversed. So you can bring them back to the yarn stage again, and that's taking inspiration from nature's processes. Another thing that we can think about that I mentioned earlier is customization. So here, this model has a product that's custom to their fit, right? So you can, as you're additively building and using software and automation, you can actually custom to people. And then on the next slide, we've got images of being able to actually like weave to the spot of your body. So normally when you make fabric or products or clothing, sorry, what you would do is take yarn, weave it into a 2D form of fabric, and then lay out that fabric, cut it up, stitch it together. Because you're going straight from the yarn to the final product, you can now weave different zonal kind of patterns. You can do jacquard. This is New York Fashion Week. We collaborated with a designer there. And we, for example, that fringe is not something you would necessarily do on a flat fabric, but now we can start to weave to the actual body. And then this is a last example of new architectures that hadn't been possible before because we had been doing homogeneous, flat, woven fabric, right? But now, because we're weaving to shape, like in situ, you can start to think about new shapes that hadn't been possible before. So through all this work, a lot of silly, embarrassing prototypes, I'm really hoping to make a little mark towards and like help us move towards a way of existing with nature where we're in harmony with it, where, and I'm hoping also that we can rewrite the definition of manufacturing, change that manu part, the hand, the human like aspect of it, to something we're proud of, where what we create does not result in trash.
All right, let's get started. So San Francisco has long been known for innovation in manufacturing, but I think the tech industry overshadows like great things that are happening that I want to highlight. So that's the American Can Company. We're standing in it right now. In 1975, it got converted to AIC. And so I work with manufacturers every day, and today I'm going to highlight 4 manufacturers that are all within a 10-minute walk, and 2 of them are inside AIC. And so the first one is called Wild Type Fishery. Fisheries in San Francisco are very common. We are the city by the bay, but they make things very differently. Their pilot for what they're making right now is a salmon fillet, the world's first cultivated seafood. So the ocean is not involved in the process of making this fish. They are using a process called cellular agriculture. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of cellular agriculture. And so they really are cultivating seafood from scratch right here in the building that we're in, just a mere feet away. I'm not sure what direction. But they are taking the cells from a live salmon, and they are incubating them and cultivating them and combining them with miscellaneous plant matter to arrive at a salmon fillet that tastes like the real thing. And they've described it to me kind of like they're running a microbrewery, you know, like brewing beer. Just this tank looks very similar, you know, and this is what they are doing. They are growing this fish in a lab. And so it enables them to keep their footprint really small because there's no boats. You know, everything's happening in this room that you're seeing here. The salmon's getting grown, it's getting cultivated, it's getting put on trucks. The trucks are driving out to restaurants in San Francisco. No animals are being harmed. And the carbon footprint is small because it's just a truck driving from this building to restaurants, etc. Volcano Kimchi, about a 3-minute walk away. To me, sometimes manufacturing is not just coming up with an innovation that is reinventing the wheel. It can be just perfecting something, like jars of kimchi. But one thing that I say to people all the time is like, San Francisco and the Bay Area in general, this is not the easy place to manufacture. There are other places you can go. And so to manufacture here, you have to be passionate about your product, but you also have to be passionate about the city and the Bay Area at large. The person who runs Volcano Kimchi is you know, a shining example of what I just said. Her name is Aruna Lee, that's her right there. She, you know, meeting her and talking to her for 2 seconds, even if you've never tried kimchi, you fall in love with her, you also love kimchi. So she does cooking demos. She takes people on, let's say, like foraging missions to, you know, get the cabbage, get the vegetables. I love how that person's like taking notes in the notebook. But the idea is like truly like it's a combination of just good old-fashioned manufacturing and like knowing where your food comes from, and just meeting somebody who's excited about that is very infectious. Rapid fire. Standard Deviant, about 6-minute walk away from here. Famously started in the Mission. Just last year they opened at Pier 70, which is really close by. Pier 70 is becoming its own kind of like manufacturing hub, just like the one that we're in right now. And that's their gorgeous space. You know, they make beer. They make it in the Mission, and they make it in the Dog Patch. But another thing that manufacturing means to me is giving back to your community. And that's a word and a term or phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but at SF Made, we've worked with this company so much, and they, on a hyper-specific local level, they give back to their community. They do food drives for both the Mission and the Dog Patch. They donate to very specific charities that like truly help out where they're from. They've even worked with SF Made to give us the space to host events, which then give our free services to small manufacturers and businesses in San Francisco. So the term like, you know, giving back to the community, I think that's another exemplary manufacturer. But going back to like truly innovative processes, and a company that's also right here in this building. This is GaiaStar. You can see there it says a world where single-use products have zero waste and pollution. And he's holding an example of what they make. Now, they are 3D printing objects in a way that we've never seen before. This is their pilot, this is their test subject. It is a single/multi-use coffee cup that they launched with Verve Roasteries here in San Francisco, the coffee company. So you can go in there and for like $1.50 more, instead of getting a paper cup, you can get this thing. And I've held it in my hands, it's like an eggshell thin 3D printed cup. They have a proprietary process that I can't describe to you because it's not public. But if you're familiar with 3D printing, it's usually made with like PLA filaments, so it's plastic, you know, certainly doesn't return to the earth. But everything that GaiaStar is making is made of 3 things: water, salt, and clay, and that's it. And so the way that they are thinking about it is that, you know, I mean, the way I think about it is I could go get that coffee cup, drink my coffee, I wouldn't do this, but put it on the ground, smash it to dust on the concrete, and it's gonna completely return to the earth. So just like Unspun, you know, they're working on this very short life cycle, something that they control completely with natural elements, and something that goes right back into the planet when it's done. And the most exciting thing about this technology is that, and here's like a new case study, that's not a coffee cup, that's a serving bowl, but the idea is they can 3D print any object. So it's like, they're starting with a coffee cup. Where do they go from here? The possibilities are endless, and it's just, very exciting. And so, to me, manufacturing is like developing new processes, but also just being super passionate about what you make.
Thank you. Turns out kids don't need a lot of teaching on the hammer part. So I want to walk you through 4 of these innovation spaces and talk about what they are, how they work, how community has functioned in these spaces. And I'm going to ask you to do an exercise with me at the end of this. So the first one is the Autodesk Technology Center, also known as Pier 9. 12,000 square feet of fabrication space, including CNC, metal shop, wood, digital fabrication, textiles, electronics, all the goods. But beyond the equipment, the exciting, most exciting part about Pier 9 has been the community. I know there are a few people here in the room. We had a thriving artist in residence program. It evolved into a designer in residence and then a manufacturer in residence program. And this was one of the early innovation spaces in the Bay Area that kind of led the wave of tech companies investing in these hands-on making spaces within the companies. This space also confirmed an idea that diverse communities sharing tools can contribute to larger industry-level discussions. They are not just maker spaces for passionate personal projects, but can really contribute to that larger dialogue. And that within all of this, the power is in this photo, people connecting with each other. The collaboration between architects, artists, designers, and people prototyping and doing that hands-on work. It happens at the computers, it happens at the desks, it happens at the machines. And that, I would say, was the power of what happened at the pier. Because it was this moment, and it was the moments, all the moments that followed in those cohorts of people who got to know each other, became peers and collaborators as they left these spaces. They were doing the hands-on work here together, and then they were helping each other build better work through those interactions and those cross-disciplinary interactions. The next space is New Lab Detroit. This was a COVID project, and for this project, I was working on 20,000 square feet of fabrication labs, bringing it from initial design through equipment spec, including every roll of tape and pencil, and every mill, and every robot arm. It was a really phenomenal project, but this was a huge corporate project with a partnership between New Lab, fostering startup innovation space, and Ford Motor Company. So a different scale from what we did at Pier 9, which was a single corporation, sort of inward-facing. This was huge, and right in downtown Detroit. For me, the magic in this project was not just the opportunity to go from construction site through to the realization of the space, but honestly, to bring together the 9 subject matter experts in this consulting project, to bring together the folks who wanted to have that very lively conversation about what's important to have here, how we facilitate that hands-on fabrication process for people who are approaching it for the first time. And as you can see, this is really a space for startups and folks with the privilege and the access to something like this. They had access to funding, they had access to audiences. And for the folks who worked here, this is about supporting the design iteration process, about learning the tools to communicate with engineers, but knowing that after they go through this process, in order to make the work that they're actually proposing, it goes into the hands of so many other people in the manufacturing process. So I think of this as sort of, this is the prototyping, this is the proto-manufacturing spaces. This is about connecting with manufacturing at large, and this was really focused on e-mobility, as different from the other spaces. Coming back to San Francisco, I got to work with Human Made for a short time and help them scale up from their original location to their new location on Bryant. And this was, again, another very different type of experience, since this was a nonprofit space. And their flagship program was about manufacturing workforce training, which brought in a completely different element from those other type of innovation spaces. This was bootstrapped, this was make it work, and this was connecting to job training. And my role here was in part helping to design the shops and the layout of the equipment, but was really about developing the hardware accelerator program. And I will say it was a mess, it was super exciting, and it was really interesting to ground that innovation track for those startups in connection with folks who were working on the same machines to build job skills, and folks who were also coming in to use the makerspace and build their passion projects. And that combination was very unique and very different, and I think also very meaningful. And it changes the course of the kind of innovation that happens in those spaces, and the kind of conversations that those innovators have when they're in connection with the folks who will be pursuing those manufacturing positions afterwards. And finally, and this is the most exciting for me, I have not been at Stanford long, but I am having a blast. Because for me, this is the first space where the goals, the vision, the values completely align with the outcomes. So I have joined Stanford to turn this 12,000 square foot building into the home of the engineering clubs. These are students who are literally launching rockets into space. They are building drones, they're building a car from every nut and bolt all the way through racing in 2 to 3 years. They are flying drones, they're doing it all. And the exciting part is they come in fresh. There is going to be a continual churn of students who are just excited to get their hands on the tools. And the thing that we will be evaluated on is whether they have built those lifelong friendships, whether they are making connections across disciplines and learning to work with electrical engineers and mechanical engineers, and learning how to be leaders in this space. So my job really is to come in and build the framework, to set the policies and the operations and the safety measures, but to have the students come in and run this, and be the leaders in this space, to own it, and to build that peer-to-peer interaction. So for me, the Stanford project is super exciting. It's the chance where all the things I've learned through these other innovation spaces are coming together. And now I want to bring that to this room, and go with me here. We're going to do an exercise. But for me, the powerful part of these innovation spaces has been about connection and community. And for me, that's where these meaningful things come about. So I want to challenge you to look around this room and recognize this as a point of community for all of us. That we all made it here, which being in person turns out to be a big deal. You made the arrangements, you showed up, we're here. And we're here for a reason to talk about these industries. And to connect and to experience this together. And to me, the most radical thing that we can do is also to build together. And so I want to challenge you to turn this into something, a counterpoint to architectural culture of critique, but to make this a kind of space where we fill each other up, where we appreciate each other, where we are generous with our appreciation, and to recognize all the folks that aren't in the room, that we are the designers and the planners, and then we hand our work off to others who go ahead and make it. Is often the course, and that's what I see in these innovation spaces. And I see most of you are designers. So hang with me here. Going to Catholic church as a kid, the service always stopped, and we had to stand up and turn to all the people around us and shake their hands and look them in the eye and say, "Peace be with you." You may also have been traumatized by this practice. I think we can reinvent that. I think we can all stand up, take a moment to think about something generous, something filling, something you can offer to the people around you. Thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in conversation about how we build together. Because for this moment in the world, the thing we need the most is connection and community. So for the end of this, I want to ask you all to stand up and shake a few hands and say hello and connect the community that's in the room here tonight.